Hey, Run Tribe by community. Welcome to the Enduring Minds podcast on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I am one of your hosts, Jason Bahamundi, and I'm going to be joined by Evan Birch and Aum Gandhi on today's show. The Enduring Minds podcast is a show about breaking the silence and stigma surrounding men's mental health. We will be open, honest, and vulnerable with each other and you about our struggles with our mental health, but it isn't going to be all gloomy. We do have some wins under our belts, and we'll share those as well. You may ask yourself why this is a show on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, and it's because the three of us are endurance athletes, and we sometimes use running to help us with our struggles. Today, Evan and I will interview Aum as we work our way through introducing you to our hosts. Last month, we interviewed Evan, and you can find that episode on the Run Try Bike YouTube channel, as well as on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts. Next month, Evan and Aum will interview me. Then we will start to bring on guests to discuss their mental health struggles and how they are breaking the silence and the stigma. So without any more words from me, let's bring on Evan and then Aum to get the show started. Evan, man, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being on the other side of the questions this time. I got some good ones for home, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I won't lie, I've already got sweaty palms for next month, so we'll see how that works out. Let's get Aum on the show and start to chat with him about his mental health struggles, his wins, and everything in between. Hey, Aum, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty all right. I got to be honest. Like I talked about in the green room, it's been a bit of a roller coaster since the Moab DNF, but I'm always happy to have these conversations, and really excited to. Well, excited is a statement of like, I'm happy to open up, but it's going to be interesting being on the other side of this. But as I mentioned at the end of the last conversation, like I can't imagine two other people I would rather be doing this with. So
Appreciate
excited
that.
for that.
It's going to be a little bit strange because we talk every day, and to have this in a more formal atmosphere is going to be a little bit odd for us, I think. But we'll make our way through. And so I just kind of want my first question for you is, I guess, generic in scope, but I really would like a specific answer. So why are we having this discussion today? Like, why is it important to you to have this conversation about mental health and your mental health struggles?
For me, I grew up in a toxic masculine environment that is breeded by what the perception of men is, what other men perceive other men to be, and what society has perceived men to be. And it also comes down to being bounded in cultural trauma as well, and the dynamics of Asian households and South Asian families. And for me, having this conversation is important, not only as a man, but as a South Asian man, to show others as who I am that like it's okay to feel that men are not uncaring rocks that only have one emotion, and that's either no emotion or anger. Like we are. You can cry, like you can smile, like you can be giddy, like Jason's smiling right now, and like it's a conversation that we have to have. And I think that the love that we got for that first episode, shout out to Toby and a few others who reached out. I'm sure you both have had people who reached out as well. uh, this is an important conversation to have. Like, this is something that needs to be talked about. And I will say that not only men have reached out to us, but women have talked to us about how important it is for men to be talking about something else other than the ball game.
Yeah, your story from the moment that we started talking years ago. I mean, I can't even think of when we first started talking, but I never understood a lot of things about your story until we started having these conversations in a broader sense. And, the interesting thing is like mental health doesn't discriminate, like it doesn't care race, color, creed, any of those things. So I think the question that I want to start with, and I didn't even have it on my list, but it was something I was listening to a podcast this morning with a guy named Corey Richards on Rich Roll, and I was talking about how me, I'm very aware of how privileged I am to grow up middle class Caucasian in Canada in a very safe environment. So from your perspective, and I know you mentioned the cultural aspects of it. How would you describe your mental health journey within the bounds of your cultural aspects that you've had to kind of contend with that other people may not understand because they don't have that lived experience?
When you are told constantly to be tough, don't show tears, don't cry, and constantly have to create a safe space for yourself because you're also tending to the needs of others in your community who are also dealing with trauma, such as your parents, your relatives, uh, and you were growing up in essentially an environment where day to day is survival. Uh, like to preface, like I grew up, the first 6, 7 years of my life, I grew up in a house that essentially had cracks everywhere. Like there were rats and infestations of cockroaches, and like not to be TMI, but the toilet would overflood every single time there was rain. There were 10, 15 of us living in the house. And, I had to be strong from the get go. Uh, and a lot of that for me was not just bound in like what men should be, it was bound in like South Asian culture and tradition of like not only me being the first child, but being like a male child, and also the first in my immediate family to be born in the States. So there's that side of like coming from an immigrant family and the expectation that my parents, built money through their blood essentially and want me to create a better life and wanted to create a better life for me. And so the way I would describe being in an environment like that, I didn't realize that what I had was not normal until I started going to more, until I moved out from that area and I started going to a more affluent school in an affluent neighborhood. And I started to realize, like, man, I don't have these van shoes or these backpacks. I don't know what these kids are talking about when their parents say, like, when I see them and their parents are saying, I'm proud of you, Like, none of that makes sense to me. And that was when the perception really broke for me. It's like realizing, I don't know if the example is like the frog, there's the example of the frog that's like you put it in the water and it like jumps out versus like the frog that's like boiling alive and doesn't know it because the heat is slowly simmering up. I think it's more of like I could see all around me. I thought that was my environment. And then when I got to middle school and started going to that affluent school, and started being bullied also for being different, um, I I started trying to walk out ahead and I bumped into a glass ceiling. So I could see out there. I could see that I thought I had this environment around me and that was the normal environment. But then I saw everything out there, and when I tried to move, there was a glass ceiling of expectations. And it took me many, many years to break that glass ceiling. And so I felt like I was trapped for most of my childhood.
I don't know why I even prepare questions because I think 17 just jumped into my mind and I've been trying to write down as you've been talking. And one of the ones I wrote down, which I found interesting in your answer, was you discussed safe space. And it made me think about how do you even begin to create a safe space for yourself in that environment? And did that safe space lead to you having bouts with alcohol abuse?
Man, yeah. For me, creating that's a good question. For me, creating a safe space, I don't even know that I can't even say that I did a good job of creating a safe space. I think that we can all look back at our stories. I know that I can look back at mine and say, like, I made a lot of mistakes and did a lot of things that I didn't want to do, such as the alcohol abuse, uh, such as turning to food for comfort, such as like just trying to be somebody that I wasn't so that I didn't get bullied. Um, Trying to be somebody that I wasn't at home so I didn't get, so I could deal with the abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, products of a South Asian environment. And alcohol abuse was one of the ways I tried to cope and create that safe space. I'd spent so many years numbing those emotions. I was looking for the next thing when I became an adult. When I was a kid, I didn't have access to that alcohol. So, for me, it was food. I turned to fast food. I turned to easy food. I built off the eating habits that were in kind of the South Asian community. It's a high carb kind of diet. And I just started like gaining weight after that and just remembered blacking out and just eating food to cope with everything I was dealing with. And fast food is cheap, it's easy to grab. So it was also a byproduct of like what could be afforded. And so all those things kind of culminated to create my quote unquote safe space. I also, once we got a computer in the household, like I remember spending hours just being like online, like getting into like, I kind of grew up in the age of like when kids were starting to get into like online games, like MMOs, like massive multiplayer games. And I used a bunch of different things to try to escape having the real conversations and try to escape the trauma that I was going through. And um, it all just culminated when I was 17. And uh, yeah, I created, I had suicidal ideation and I almost acted on my plan. Uh, and yeah, I don't know that I did a good job of creating a safe space, but I think that we do the best we can with what we have in that moment.
Yeah, like your story, it just, all of us share like an emotional connection to our stories, and we all have different levels of the stories that we've experienced ourselves personally. But I think that's the cool thing about the vulnerability aspect of having these conversations is it gives us the opportunity to see ourselves and other people through their stories, but at the same time connect on a very deep emotional level that I would argue that most men don't connect. I do want to quickly go back to when you were talking about breaking through that glass ceiling. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but I've heard it described as your parents' ceiling is your floor. So your parents were only ever able to go so far because of what they were given as children themselves. And now you, as an adult coming in, like your floor is where their ceiling is, and you kind of have this ability to go beyond what that was. So how does that land for you? Just in me saying that, I was just curious because when I heard you say that, like that's instantly what came to mind for me. Like what do you take away from that?
My parents are my heroes. Uh, what my mom went through, just seeing the things that she went through when I was there, the things we went through together, what my dad has suffered through, the money that he's built, they both built with their own blood, and the suffering that they had to go through. They did the best they could with what they had. What I Two things can coexist at the same time, and this is something that's very important to say. I went through verbal abuse and physical abuse within my family, and that was because of the tools that my parents had, that my extended family had. They did the best they could with what they had, and they suffered even more at the hands of like the people that were behind them in their environment. And I think that we are all just products of like a broken system in this South Asian environment. And so I don't think I've ever heard it said that way, but I think that it's true. Like what was my parents' ceiling is my floor. And they really sacrificed and they worked hard for me and they worked through their own things. And as I was growing up and not as I was working through what I went through, I could see them mellowing out and maturing over time and working through what they went through to the point where we've had deep conversations about like everything that happened in the past. And like they see the work that I'm doing to put this out there, both as an endurance athlete and through Enduring Minds and through my vocalization on social media. And they're behind me every step of the way because, you know, like all those things can coexist, and we're all just byproducts of this environment, and change needs to happen. And I feel like because I have more tools than they did, and I think this might be true for, many kids, not just immigrant kids, but kids who have taken the next step, they're the next step in a generation or whatever. Like, I feel like I have the responsibility to break those chains or keep breaking those chains if I haven't broken them, because there's obviously still like some shit that I have to work at and will probably be working out for the rest of my life. Um, but I feel like it is now my responsibility to take the tools that they gave me, the tools that their parents gave them, my grandparents, and to break those chains and to build something new. And it's honestly like, I don't think I've ever said this, because I feel like it's hard to say without feeling like I have an ego or arrogance or whatever, but it's hard. It's hard. Like, it's hard, like, going through the first formative years of your life and feeling like everything you did and said and went through is normal, that you're supposed to feel like you're trapped at any given moment, that you're supposed to hide your tears and then, cry when you're not around anybody else. And like, it's so damn hard. And then, like, getting to that point of where you realize that this is not okay. Like, even then, it's like there was a whole journey for me of realizing, like, okay, it's not okay, but what is okay? What is right? What is normal? And like, it took me so many years. I mean, I'm 30 years old, and I went through counseling over the years. I tried therapy a few different times. It took me 30 years of my life. My last birthday, well, my 30th birthday, was when I realized I needed to go back to therapy. And that was the first time I was able to consistently sit with the therapist over this entire year and finally open up and break free, because that therapist specializes in cultural trauma, which is something I didn't have with other therapists. So it's taken me years of my life, and I'm still working through it.
It's a thank you for sharing that, and because it leads also into this next question. You talked about suffering verbal and physical abuse as a kid, and then you called your parents your heroes. It could very easily have been you holding a grudge as you go through the process. I'm wondering if the idea of your parents being your heroes is sort of a recency bias because of where you are today versus when you were a kid going through the process of physical and verbal abuse. Did you understand what was happening and thought to yourself, well, they don't mean it, shall we say, like providing excuses? And or could you have easily gone down the path of holding a grudge, getting out of the house, saying goodbye to your parents and never seeing them again? Because that happens in some households as well.
Yeah, well, one thing I will say is that I did suffer verbal and physical abuse from my parents. We have talked about it. Uh, and we've had deep conversations about, like, what they went through and what I went through. And but I will also say that most of my verbal and physical abuse also comes from most of it comes from the extended family, especially the verbal abuse. Physical abuse was a little bit less far and few in between there, and we've had the conversation about how it's not okay. And um, I do think that there is a bit of like, I do think that while there is a bit of recency bias, like, it kind of goes back, the forgiveness aspect of it kind of goes back to the fact that, like, my parents did the best with the tools that they had. Like, when my dad told stories about what his grandfather did to him, like, he was getting beat on the daily almost, like every single day. My mom has suffered and been beaten and punished by her stepmother over the years. And like for me, like that was so few and far in between. And it's crazy to have those conversations because like it feels like when talking to my therapist, like it was an interesting conversation because it feels like I'm justifying it when now I've reached a point that I'm not. Like none of that is okay. Yeah. But at the same time, there's a duality of like what existed in that environment for South Asian people. Like they're just one cog in this machine that needs to be fixed and all these things that need to be normalized. Um, I definitely spent a lot of my formative childhood years making excuses, trying to like justify everything. I will say that like there there are moments where I felt like I had to spare feelings, and that was a huge thing with everything that went on. Like there were times when I stepped up and I fought back, especially with the extended family, and then I was asked to beg for forgiveness to respect my parents' honor. And I don't think that that's okay either, but it happened. Uh, it's one of those weird dynamics too, where my parents have regretted what has happened. My extended family has regretted what has happened, but like it's one of those things where it's like you can't really say I forgive you because then it's like forgive me for what, you know? Like
Yeah.
because the cultural aspect of it is also like, and it's true, like they put a roof over my head, they gave me a household, um, you know, they made sure I wasn't on the streets, you know? And so I think I think the moment that things changed for me and I started taking gratitude and built a strong relationship with my parents who I love dearly and appreciate all the sacrifices they make was when I realized that nothing in life can be dealt in absolutes. Like it's this way or that way. There's a duality to everything. There's a duality to every human being. Everybody has good and bad. And when I look around at people in my extended family, when I look around at friends that I've talked to, when I look at peers, I've realized that everybody's behaviors and the way they act, even the way I act when I'm around my partner who grew up in a more normalized environment, everybody acts in response to their trauma. And
100%.
we were all reacting in response to our trauma. And for me, a big part of just to come around from this long-winded answer, a big part of what all of that has done, especially justifying and making excuses, is constantly spending almost the entirety of my 20s being a people pleaser, spending a big amount of my life just, you know, like I'm constantly apologizing and saying I'm sorry, you know, I can't take a compliment. When somebody says, I'm proud of you or good job, I put my head down. Like these are things I had to work on with my therapist who literally gave me activities like, I want you to make eye contact with somebody who gives you a compliment for 10 seconds and take the compliment. And I was like, dude, you were asking me to do a 300 miler right now. I would rather go out and do a 300 mile right now. And then she asked me to ask somebody else for help for small things. So I'm going around, I'm sitting at home and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like, hey, babe, can you get me a glass of water? And that was hard to do. Like, so, I mean, people pleasing, like not being able to ask for help, like not being able to take the compliment. Like I've noticed all these behaviors and patterns as a response to my trauma.
Yeah. Before I turn it over to Evan, we have some comments from the audience. Jake with the Journey with Jake podcast said, I am so impressed with Aum. And Joe, who is the host of the Beyond the Finish Line on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, said, our stories align in so many ways and just want to say how amazing and brave you are, Aum. Evan, I'll turn it over to you for the next question.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I mean, those are only the first two people that we've had comment today. But I mean, like you said at the start of the show, the number of people that have commented so far is just incredible. So it's nice to hear those. Uh, um, it's just like Jason. I had these like predetermined questions that I thought I'd be asking, and throughout so far, the words that I've really heard you repeat multiple times are escape, distract, avoid, suppress, ignore, justify, all things that I think I can relate to, Jason can probably relate to, and so many other listeners can relate to. I mean, like words are very powerful. Like our brains are meaning making machines. Like whatever story we tell ourselves, we begin to retell. It turns into a memory. We start to believe it, and then it starts to become our identity. So, in your journey towards understanding yourself and your identity, how has your relationship with your own mental health really evolved over time? And can you pinpoint any specific moments that really shaped that evolution? And I kind of want to go in the direction of when you found running. So I'll leave it open ended that, and I want to see where it goes here.
Definitely. So I'll go back and I'll say that when we were talking about coping mechanisms for a safe space, I struggle with obesity due to like the eating disorder. I struggle with a spectrum of eating disorders. For me, when I started exercising, it was restricting calories. That lasted up on and off until almost like 2022. But before that, because eating became my comfort zone, it was struggling with overeating and blacking out and overeating and like using food as a comfort. I say that because I have a family history of diabetes. My dad has diabetes. My grandpa had diabetes. Uh, his great grandpa had diabetes. And when I was 18 years old, I was 250 pounds. And I was going to be the next in line because the doctor said I had pre-diabetes. And that was for me a huge wake up call. This was also coming off another pivotal moment, which we discussed earlier in the show a year before, where I had both a razor and a pill bottle in my hand. And when I was 17 years old and was ready to act on a suicide plan. And that was not the last time I contemplated it, but the last time I ever got that close. And so I went on this weight loss journey. Everything was physical for me at that point. Everything was about losing weight, getting healthier. I didn't, even though I had seen even though I had gone through that ideation, the suicidal ideation, I hadn't put the pieces of the puzzle together where I viewed exercise as anything more than a tool to like lose weight. And I still dealt with everything in absolutes. Like if I lose this weight, if I build this six pack, like I'm going to be a happier person overall. Like I wasn't mature enough to understand. It goes back to like, I don't know how to be happy. I don't know how to be normal. Um, and then I left college. I started working in private sector of engineering, which, you know, when you're starting out in civil, you're a salaried employee, you're working massive overtime, 60 to 80 hours a week, and not just during peak seasons, but almost year round. And when I was 25 years old, I worked on like $1 million projects in aviation and transportation, almost entirely on my own at one point, because why hire another person when one person could do the job of three people? And I was working like these 70, 80-hour weeks. And that was the first time I started looking around desperately. You know, the alcohol that I was drinking, that started to get worse. I was trying to grasp for something else that was a good outlet for me. And I needed something that was simple. And I had tried running before in the past, but it was always a punishment. Uh, so when I was 25, one night, April of 2018, I went out and I ran a quarter of a mile. I just put on workout clothes and just ran as hard as I could for 5 minutes. And I felt sick. I felt nauseated, but you know, I felt like I had control of something. I felt like I had control of something. And I had spent, because of like everything that, because of the abuse, because of the disdain and the bullying, like I started building this mindset of like self-sabotaging myself, like habitual quitting. All the other times that I had tried to like lose weight, all the other times I had tried to like quit overeating, like maybe I would say losing weight was my first success, but that was kind of over the years I realized there was a duality with like restricting calories on that, and I gained a lot of that weight back in when I was 25. Um, but I will say that running was the first time I felt like I not only had true control, but it was also the first time I said, "What if I just keep going? Like this is what if I just don't quit? What if I just stay consistent?" And so I started running every single day. And I started doing like 10 minutes to being able to run 15 minutes to doing a 5K. And at a pivotal moment in 2020, I eventually found ultra running and trail running. But I don't know that. I think this goes back to not dealing with anything in absolutes and dealing with the duality of everything. I don't even know that when I first got into running, like I'm thankful that it helped my mental health, but it also started this journey of like not only like dealing with like the alcohol, now I'm dealing with a relationship with running as well. I think it goes to something you said, Evan, back in a conversation we had of like running away from something and running towards something. And I felt like at that time I was running away from something.
My brain comes back to when you were mentioning that job at 25 and doing the job of three people. All I can picture is those crazy people that run 200s with a drop bag and no crew. That's what I envisioned in my mind, is like, when is Aum going to run one of these solo with no crew? But you figured out how to ask for help now, so it's good.
It's amazing to me how we can look at what we're doing in the trail running, ultra running world and find those connections, because I think that's what the whole point of this show is the connection between running and our mental health and our mental health and our running. And I did have another question lined up, but now I want to ask a different one since we're talking about running. You know, oftentimes we hear the phrase runner's high, right? And it's always this positive stuff. Go on social media, and nobody ever talks about, I shouldn't say never because there are no absolutes, but the vast majority of people do not discuss the downside to running, the thing when they're hurt, when it doesn't go well. Um, have you been able to identify any moments when running has led to a downslide versus the uplifting that we often hear about with the runner's high?
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying this, that too much of anything cannot be good, and intention matters. I don't know that I would have been able to put it in those words if I hadn't had a recent conversation with Jordan Cole, Circles for Infinity. Uh, he calls running an active meditation, and I ask him the same question that I'm answering myself about, like, you know, can running be an addiction? And the answer, simple answer, is yes. Like, you're, no matter what you do in life, like I think that your intention matters. And my intention at the time was running away from something and trying to fight my alcohol abuse, which still lasted until I was, starting to get deep into ultra running until 2 weeks after my first 100 miler. But what I didn't know at the time was I was starting a sobriety journey, and I was trading one addiction for another. I had found something else to cope with the alcohol abuse. I'm thankful I haven't gone back. Um, and this all culminated into 2021, where I started running one race after another. In 2022, where I decided to up the ante, and like I was doing three 100 milers in 3 months. And, I did like a stage race in Peru, and like I signed up for Moab, uh, not knowing if I could finish it. And while I'm grateful to all those moments, like I think what was happening was I'd found that runner's high And it's like a dopamine addiction. I just kept chasing it over and over and over again and seeing if I could get more out of this. I was so, I'm grateful to running because it really helped me discover, it helped me, or I should even say rediscover who Om truly is. When I was 6 months old, my mom talked about how I would never sit still, how I would always run around. When we went to Singapore airport on the way to India, I ran around for 6 hours straight. Somewhere along the line, I lost that. And I feel like running helped me rediscover my true self. And I think that what comes with that is I think I got attached to it because I have such an addictive mindset, an addictive personality, and was looking for that next mechanism to create a safe space. And for me, the pivotal moment when I realized that was when I DNF'd the Moab 240 for the first time in 2022 at mile 235, because at mile 225, I blew out my hip, and I missed the last cutoff and I walked it in, uh, and then decided not to do the last 3 miles because I was just numb and defeated. And for 8 weeks, I couldn't run. And it forced me to rethink my relationship with running. It put me into a deep mental rut to the point where I was feeling suicidal ideation again for the first time. Um, since 2011. And it helped me realize that my relationship with running was not in fact healthy, and I had to reevaluate it, even to the point where there was a moment where I had to decide like if I was going to keep running or not. And I realized that I just needed to rebuild. I needed to reevaluate my mindset. And I'm thankful that I run from a place of joy and running towards something now. I think that those other emotions still exist, but I primarily run for gratitude now and like for joy and the ability to move. And it does help my mental health. But running is therapeutic, it's not therapy. And it took me a long time to realize that and stop seeing running as just another coping mechanism and start seeing it as a foundational, like one of the many foundational pieces of a multifaceted human that is doing a bunch of different things. And yeah, it's been quite a journey. And I think that we can all say that we've had evolutions in the way we view running and other things in our lives.
Man, you gave me goosebumps just listening to that, because if we were to just take out all of the like different paths that we went on, I went through the exact same situation you did, just different circumstances. So hearing you talk about, going from running being this distraction, avoidance, like new addiction, to having to like sit with yourself and decide whether or not you want to keep doing it, it kind of tells this story that, and I think a lot of people are going to resonate with this, that once you create your identity around something that you do, whether that be alcohol, a job, running, another sport, whatever that is, and then that thing is gone because of injury or lack of desire, any of those things, you literally feel the most alone you've ever felt, and you don't know where to turn. So it's very easy to fall into that depression, anxiety, those things that your brain and body remembers when you had that feeling before. And that's the thing, like a lot of people don't understand that. It's like, I argue that we're not in an epidemic of like loneliness, we're in an epidemic of not feeling. And I think as men, we can argue that not feeling is like it's something that, again, like you were talking about earlier, like you were taught not to feel, because if you had those feelings, it was seen as a negative, and you can't do that, you can't do that here. So I guess my question now is, how have you really changed the way and shifted kind of what's the best way to ask this? How has your experience with racing and training and all of these other things changed and become like not all consuming anymore, and stopping you from distracting yourself and other aspects of your life that are important to you? Like what has what have you put into place that has allowed you to get to there?
I think for me, it goes back to realizing that the realization that I had in 2022 that I am a multifaceted human being, am that I'm a son, I'm a brother, I am a business owner of Run Try Bike. I was an engineer. I, I'm a partner, and I'm also a runner. And just kind of realizing that, like, none of this is an end all be all. Um, it's funny because now looking back to my second DNF at Moab, it feels like both of them, I'm pretty damn proud of myself because how I reacted to my DNF at Moab in 2024 at the end of the Triple Crown, which was my big goal in ultra running for as long as like I've been an ultra runner. Like I signed up for that just 2 months after my sobriety in April of 2021. The DNF at Moab in 2022 still hurts. It broke me. It took me a long time to realize how proud I am of myself for going that distance, which is essentially like the whole distance. 235 miles. The only thing I didn't get was a piece of metal, which who cares? We're all going without that when we die, right? In 2024, I not only made it, I made it 82 miles. I mean, I was puking like a faucet. But if we were taking a step out and looking at absolutes again, like if I was the Aum from 2 years ago, I would be distraught that I didn't even make it as far as I did the last time. Now, I couldn't care less. Like, I will say that it still hurts, but I realized that it's okay to feel all those things. It goes back to the duality of like things that like personalities and like feelings and things that can coexist at the same time. And I think that Moab has been a good benchmark of like my growth as a human into being the person that I want to be. I think that we are working towards this infinity curve in life where we are trying to move towards the person that we're trying to be. And I feel like I'm kind of on this upsurge right now where I could see the shift in my personality from how I reacted to that DNF in 2022 to how I reacted now. And I think a lot of that was just realizing that I'm a process-oriented person now. I spent so many years of my life dealing with failure. I've had 5 DNFs in the space of ultra running. I've had many failures as a business owner. I've had many failures as an engineer. Jason's smiling because he knows. But like, I think all those things, what they've made me fall in love with, and I think a lot of that I'm grateful to the journey as a business owner too, and journey as an ultra runner, is that I've become a process-oriented person. I'm starting to get to the point where like I'm enjoying the training blocks. I'm enjoying the work that's being put in. I'm even enjoying like the problem solving around like if you're sick, if you're stressed, if you're having a hard day, and trying to adjust around that. Like I just love the process now. And I think that that has trickled to all the aspects in my life. And like, even though I have my next race in 5 or 6 months, I'm not really even thinking about the race right now. I'm just thinking about like this training block or that training block or like, and right now, because it's the early stages and I'm going through a lot of shit right now, focusing on having fun with running again after like having a long season, So I think that I think that to come around on a long-winded answer, I think it's the shift to being a process-oriented person.
Yeah, the idea of the blank guy, the blank woman, right, as identity for your personality that you mentioned and Evan mentioned is reality for a lot of us because that's how we get known on social media, and then we hang on to that. And when it starts to not work for us, becomes a negative, it's really hard to let go. And I've been through it myself as well. It's not something that's really super easy to deal with. Which leads me to this question about being a runner ohm and becoming a business owner. Um, you're an engineer by trade. Your family, I'm guessing, and although I kind of know the answer, the public may not, were not understanding of what it would be a business owner leaving a field of engineering to become a business owner. The process of going through that, couldn't have been easy. What lessons were you able to take from going through the process of dealing with your mental health struggles, to deal with those conversations with your parents, to say, look, this is a business I'm going to be invested in and it's going to be in the field of, endurance sports.
Oh man, those were crazy conversations. It was definitely, I think it was, I think it was a conversation that would have gone differently 10 years ago, but my parents have grown as much as I have. They have discovered more of themselves as much as I have. And at the end of the day, they just want me to be happy doing what I'm doing. And I don't know that that decision would have made a lot of sense if it wasn't for them watching me cross the finish line of a 100-mile race and a few 100-mile races, and just kind of realizing like kind of that these things are normal for a South Asian person. Uh, whereas like I think there's this like doctor, engineer, lawyer thing, and I think a lot of that has to do with the mindset of like wanting what's best for your child, wanting kind of like an affluent, stable lifestyle. Uh, and when my parents, when my parents got to see me do my 3-day race out across the years and like see me like like be in the RV and like hang out and like see what I was really doing out there, they started to understand like all the different paths you can take in life. Um, one they had not realized, and I don't think that I had ever realized that I had an entrepreneurial mindset. I don't even know that I had one when I signed on with this company 2.5 years ago. I've had to build it over time. Like, I had definitely had to shift away from the pick up my paycheck every other week to like working on the business and on a intangible level, like becoming a process oriented person because the results are not going to come overnight. Um, and so those conversations were interesting, but as the work started to bloom, like they've been behind me every step of the way, and they're wildly proud of like the entrepreneurial mindset that I have. They see the way that my thinking has changed, and that I'm not like I'm not fighting from a scared person. I'm not fighting from a place of like fear, fear that like, am I ever going to be able to make enough money? Like, am I ever going to be able to be stable? And I think a lot of that has to do with all the things that I've faced in life. Like, I grew up poor, but I didn't know the lessons that it taught me until I was able to refine those lessons by being an ultra runner and a business owner. I think that we all learn lessons in our lives, but we're not able to find those lessons within the things that we go through until we find something to refine them. And I feel like ultra running and business ownership are like this, like the pickaxes to dig out the gold or the diamonds from the coals.
I want to touch base on your parents being at ATY as a real quick follow up. We heard the story of the um, your childhood, and I'm wondering if in the moment at ATY when your parents are there and they're watching you go around in a circle for 3 days, like was there a scenario in which you thought to yourself, "Look how far we have come. This is awesome."
There was definitely there's definitely a moment of like um when I crossed the finish line at ATY and I crossed the finish line at my first 100 miler. And even when my documentary came out with Gore-Tex, where and being on the cover of Runner's World, where my parents got emotional at any point or another, and I remember just saying to both of them, like, "We made it," because like I'm a South Asian doing these things. I was a South Asian person on the cover of Runner's World. Like, um, to me, like, I just remember like my mom seeing the cover and my mom being at ATY and crying in both instances because of the shit that we've been through together, the shit that she knows I've been through and what she's been through, and what our descendants have been through, and realizing that holy crap, we made it, like. And I don't think there's any one moment where you're like, "Mama, I made it," But that was one of them. ATY was one of them, and I realized that was when I realized that this was not just a me thing, and this was not just a crew and a pacer and like my ultra running themed thing. This extends to the people around me who made sacrifices too. Uh, this extends to the people who helped me get here. And like, yes, I was running the miles on my own. Yes, I've spent, I was putting in the work on my own, but like to get to this point, like there are decisions that other people made in there are common threads that make everybody part of your journey in some way or another, whether it was good or bad. And for me, like my parents helped me get to the point where I was even alive and healthy and like able to pursue things freely, which is another huge thing. Like the ability to be able to pursue my dreams and not to have to like worry about like provide or the next paycheck, whatever. Like to me, that is the ultimate privilege. And so anytime I have these victories now, I don't just think I made it or the kids at Ritstone family made it or like my crew and my pacers made it. That's one we. Then there's the we of like my family, like we made it.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm like, again, these conversations, I'm learning so much about you right now. It's amazing. Absolutely love it. And you talked about duality a lot, and I can only imagine in my interactions with you and understanding the side of like being an athlete and also being a business owner and being the business is in the same space. So it's not like you're doing this thing off in the distance. You're actually running your business in the same space that you're racing, training, and being a part of. So for you, has there been any connections that you've had within the community that have been really deeply moving or something that you were unexpected showed up? And how has that really shifted your perspective on the importance of vulnerability and your own personal growth, and really shaping what the future of your own mental health journey is moving into that?
I will say that I've made some really great connections in the ultra trail community, especially in the 100 and the 200-mile distance. It feels like, I mean, I will start by saying that if it wasn't for the ultra trail community, I wouldn't have met the love of my life, my partner. Like, if I hadn't had that friendship with, you know, her dad, like, I don't think that that would have ever happened. I obviously made 2 or 3 really deep friendships in ultra running, and like when I go back to these 200-mile races, and I'm sure both of you have experienced this, when I go to those races, it feels like only 2 weeks have passed, but it like time hasn't really moved, but it's been like a damn year. It's been a damn year. And like I'm getting to see these people that I built these bonds with that feel like people who know me on a deep level. And I think that the trail community has shaped me in a way where like I've met somebody that has accentuated or helped me grow in all the different aspects of my life, not just running, which is the amazing part. Like I've met plenty of people in the ultra trail journey who have their own sobriety stories. Jason, of course, being one of them, Joe Harden being one of them, our host of Beyond the Finish Line. And that's helped me along in my sobriety journey. Then there's the mental health aspect of it. I met, you, Evan, and I've obviously had conversations with Jason, and both of us have talked to people who are dealing with mental health in the ultra trail community, and like that has helped me on my mental health journey as a man as well. And like I think that this community has helped. Like I fed into this community by running these races, and now this community is also feeding back to me, and it feels like a feedback loop where like I'm continuing to grow being around these individuals. And I think it goes back to that old saying of like you being the average of the people you spend time with. And for me, like choosing to be around these people and being a part of this community has really helped me like accelerate my growth. I don't even know if I should say accelerate, because who really knows what the hell they're doing in life. But like it's really helped me. Yeah, exactly. It's helped me grow on this path that I'm on, and I think like helped me really refine the things that I've discovered about my true self, and refine all the facets of my life, the sober athlete, the business owner, the partner, the like friend. And so I'm really grateful for the ultra trail community and how it's helped me meet individuals like both of you as well.
Our time is running out, but I'm going to encapsulate Aum's story from beginning to end with a story of my own that I love sharing with him. He's already smiling because he knows what the story is going to
I know what
be.
the story is.
So 2.5 years ago, I met Aum for the first time in person at the Coldwater Rumble in Phoenix, Arizona. And he was very shy about meeting somebody he was working with, me. And I introduced myself, and he shook my hand. And it was the worst dead fish handshake I have ever gotten. The absolute worst. And I left that conversation, and I looked at Lori, and I said to her, what the fuck did we just do? Like, how is this guy going to help us grow this business? It is now December 11th, 2 years later, 2.5 years later. And I can tell you without a doubt that the show that we're on today and the shows that are on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network don't happen without Aum gaining confidence every day for the last 2+ years as a business owner, as a runner, as an individual, as a person. And that really just encapsulates your entire story from the last hour that you have shared, from dealing with the physical and verbal abuse as a child, to suicide ideation, to alcohol abuse and body dysmorphia, to becoming a trail runner, ultra runner, not quitting on running and not quitting on yourself, to being on the cover of Runner's World, to now being an owner of In Run Try Bike, which is the premier voice of the everyday athlete and a community that is burgeoning. And so I love telling that story, not so much to embarrass you, but to remind you of where you started and where you are today, and how we're going to continue to grow not just this business, but ourselves as individuals. For those of you that have joined us late, thank you for being here. This will be on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, wherever you get your shows. And I would encourage you to go back and listen to the interview of Evan, who is one of the co-hosts here with us. We chatted with him in November. So go and search for that episode. You can find it on YouTube, our website, runtrimag.com, as well as on podcast format, wherever you get your shows. And next month, they will be interviewing me, and I will be telling my story of dealing with my mental health and my struggles and the things that I have gone through over the last, I turn 51 tomorrow. So over the last 51 years of my life, I'm already nervous. My palms are sweaty. So it'll be fun to be on the other end, as Evan said when we started this show. So Evan, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Any parting words from you?
No, just looking forward to having the conversation with you, Jason. I just realized that we're almost 3 generations apart, all of us. That's like, it just popped into my mind. We're covering the gamut of men's mental health for like 3 generations, which is cool.
That's awesome. I didn't think about that either. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You and I both know how many people it's going to help. And I can't wait to keep going down this path of building Run, Try, Bike as we do on a daily basis. Appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. And thank you so much for the kind words. Yeah, I'm just going to say, like, this episode did make my knees weak and arms heavy, and, felt like I was vomiting up mom's spaghetti, but it was, I couldn't imagine having this conversation with two better individuals, so I appreciate this and always appreciate having this show, and can't wait to be on the other side of this and give you some hard-hitting questions.
I'm ready. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Check out the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you next month on Enduring Minds, Episode 3.